Dr. Sarah Chen had seen many things during her 3 years aboard the medical frigate Mercy's Hand, but nothing quite like the creature that appeared on her scanner readings. The ship's sensors had picked up massive life signs from the asteroid field in the Kepler 442 system, and Captain Rodriguez had ordered an investigation. "What am I looking at, Doc?" asked Lieutenant Commander Hayes, peering over Sarah's shoulder at the holographic display. Sarah adjusted the scanner's frequency, trying to get a clearer reading. "Something big. Really big. The biosignatures are unlike anything in our databases." She frowned at the data streaming across her screen. "Whatever it is, it's injured. Badly." The Mercy's Hand was a small vessel designed for rapid medical response in the outer colonies. Sarah was the only qualified xenobiologist aboard, though her expertise lay primarily with known alien species. This was something entirely new. "Should we report this to command?" Hayes asked, his hand hovering over the communications console. "Let me get a visual first," Sarah said, activating the ship's external cameras. The main view screen flickered to life, showing the rocky debris of the asteroid field. At first, nothing seemed unusual. Then the camera panned left and both officers gasped. Nestled between two massive asteroids was a creature that defied description. It was easily 300 meters long, with scales that shimmered like fresh snow under the system's distant star. 4 powerful limbs ended in claws the size of shuttlecraft, and a long, serpentine neck supported a head that could have swallowed their entire ship. Most striking of all were the creature's eyes, pale blue, almost white, and clearly intelligent. "It's a dragon," Hayes whispered in disbelief. Sarah's scientific mind rejected the fantasy comparison, but she had to admit the resemblance was uncanny. More concerning were the obvious signs of injury. Dark fluid, presumably blood, drifted in zero gravity around several deep wounds in the creature's flank. Burns scarred its hide and one wing hung at an unnatural angle. "It's dying," Sarah said quietly. As if responding to her words, the creature's massive head turned toward their ship. Those pale eyes focused on the camera with unmistakable awareness. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. This wasn't just an animal. This was a sapient being. "Doc, look at this," Hayes said, pointing to another section of the scanner display. "There's a smaller signature right next to the big one." Sarah refined the scan and her breath caught. There was indeed a second creature, much smaller, perhaps 30 meters long, with similar biosignatures. It appeared to be uninjured but was staying very close to the larger being. "Offspring," she murmured. "The small one is staying with its parent." Suddenly, the ship's communication system crackled to life. "Medical frigate Mercy's Hand. This is Admiral Thorne of the Galactic Defense Council. Respond immediately." Hayes and Sarah exchanged glances. Admiral Thorne was the GDC's chief enforcement officer, known throughout human space for his ruthless efficiency. His presence here couldn't be coincidental. "This is Mercy's Hand," Hayes replied. "Lieutenant Commander Hayes speaking. Commander Hayes, you are ordered to clear the area immediately. A priority alpha containment operation is in progress." Sarah grabbed the microphone. "Admiral, this is Dr. Chen, Chief Medical Officer. We have detected a severely injured sapient being. If this is a containment operation, I formally request permission to render medical assistance under the Galactic Medical Emergency Protocols." A long pause followed. When Thorne's voice returned, it was ice cold. "Request denied, Doctor. The entity you have detected has been classified as a Class 5 existential threat. It is to be destroyed immediately. Admiral, with respect, the being appears to be dying already, and there's a juvenile present. Dr. Chen, you will withdraw immediately or face charges of interfering with a GDC military operation. That is a direct order." The communication channel closed with a sharp click. Sarah stared at the screen, watching the magnificent creature struggle with its wounds. The smaller being, the offspring, had moved closer, pressing its smaller form against its parent's injured side. "We have to help them," Sarah said. Hayes shook his head. "Doc, you heard the Admiral. This is way above our pay grade. Since when do we abandon injured beings because some bureaucrat labels them a threat? Look at them, Commander. The big one can barely move and the little one is just trying to comfort its parent. What kind of threat could they possibly pose?" On the view screen, the smaller creature suddenly lifted its head and looked directly at their ship. Sarah felt that same chill of recognition. These beings were intelligent, emotional, and one of them was dying while the other watched helplessly. "The Hippocratic Oath doesn't have a species exemption clause," Sarah said firmly. "I'm suiting up." "Absolutely not. I won't let you— Commander, I'm not asking for permission. I'm informing you of my intention. You can file whatever reports you want afterward. Hayes stared at her for a long moment, then sighed. Damn it, Doc, you know I can't let you go alone. 20 minutes later, Sarah was sealed inside her environmental suit, medical kit secured to her back. Hayes had reluctantly agreed to take them closer in one of the ship's shuttles, though he'd made it clear he thought they were both making a career-ending mistake. As they approached the injured creature, its smaller companion moved to intercept them. Sarah held her breath, but instead of aggression, the juvenile being simply positioned itself between them and its parent, watching them carefully. It's protecting the injured one, Sarah observed. The shuttle's proximity sensors began chiming warnings as they drew closer. The creatures were even more massive up close, and Sarah felt a moment of doubt. What was she planning to do? Her medical training was designed for humanoid physiology, not whatever these beings were. The juvenile creature moved again, this time approaching their shuttle directly. Sarah watched in amazement as it extended what appeared to be a gesture of invitation, one clawed appendage pointing toward its parent, then back to their shuttle. I think it wants us to help, Sarah whispered. Either that, or it's deciding which one of us to eat first, Hayes muttered, but he maneuvered the shuttle closer. As they approached the injured creature's side, Sarah could see the full extent of the damage: energy weapon burns, explosive trauma, and what appeared to be systematic targeting of vital areas. This wasn't the result of an accident or natural disaster. Someone had deliberately tried to kill this being. The juvenile creature positioned itself near the shuttle's exit port and looked directly at Sarah through the transparent aluminum. In those pale blue eyes, she saw desperation, hope, and unmistakable intelligence. Sarah made her decision. Against all regulations and common sense, she activated the shuttle's docking procedure. The moment Sarah stepped out of the shuttle's airlock, she realized her environmental suit's life support system was struggling. The readings showed breathable atmosphere around the creatures, but with unusual energy signatures that made her equipment work overtime. The juvenile being watched her every move with those intelligent pale eyes, making soft sounds that her universal translator couldn't decode. Easy there, Sarah said softly, holding up her medical scanner. I'm here to help. The creature, she decided to think of it as the hatchling, tilted its massive head. Despite being 30 meters long, there was something undeniably young about its movements and expressions. It gestured again toward its parent, who lay motionless except for the labored rise and fall of breathing. Sarah approached the injured adult, her scanner working frantically to analyze the alien physiology. What she found was both fascinating and heartbreaking. The creature's body operated on principles unlike anything in Earth biology, but there were enough similarities for her to understand the extent of the damage. Multiple organ systems were failing. Energy weapon burns had cauterized major blood vessels, creating internal bleeding that the creature's natural healing couldn't address. Worse, someone had specifically targeted what appeared to be neural connection points along the creature's spine, a deliberate attempt to cause paralysis. This was torture, Sarah muttered, revulsion clear in her voice. The hatchling made a low sound, almost like a whimper. It moved closer to Sarah, and she felt a strange tingling sensation in her mind. Images began to flash before her eyes, not her own memories, but something else entirely. She saw the adult creature soaring through space, its massive wings spread wide, moving between star systems with impossible grace. The hatchling was there too, smaller, learning to fly in the vacuum between worlds. They were beautiful together, clearly family, clearly intelligent beings living peacefully in the void. Then came the ships. Sleek vessels with GDC markings surrounding the pair. Sarah felt the adult's confusion, then fear as weapons powered up. The attack was swift and brutal, designed not to kill quickly but to disable and torment. The adult had tried to shield its offspring, taking blast after blast while the hatchling watched helplessly. The vision faded, leaving Sarah gasping inside her helmet. The hatchling was looking at her expectantly, as if it had deliberately shared these memories. They hunted you, Sarah said, and the hatchling nodded, an eerily human gesture. Her medical scanner chimed with an analysis-complete signal. The readings were grim but not hopeless. If she could stabilize the major organ systems and address the neural damage, there might be a chance. But it would require equipment she didn't have and procedures she'd never performed on anything remotely like this physiology. "Doc, we've got company." Hayes' voice crackled through her comm unit. 3 GDC destroyers just dropped out of hyperspace. They're moving fast. Sarah looked up at the hatchling, who had clearly understood the communication despite the language barrier. Fear flickered across its features and it moved protectively over its parent. "How long do we have?" Sarah asked. "Maybe 20 minutes before they're in weapons range. 20 minutes to save a life that had already been tortured for hours." Sarah made rapid calculations in her head. Her medical kit contained emergency surgical tools and broad-spectrum healing accelerants, but nothing designed for a creature this size. Unless the hatchling, Sarah said suddenly. "It's smaller but has the same basic physiology. If I can synthesize healing compounds from its blood samples, I might be able to create something that works." The hatchling seemed to understand her words or her intent. Without hesitation, it extended one of its claws toward her. Sarah approached cautiously and extracted a small blood sample with her surgical tools. The creature didn't even flinch. "Remarkable," she breathed, watching her analyzer break down the alien biology. The healing factors in the blood were extraordinary, far beyond anything in known science. But there wasn't enough. Even if she could synthesize the compounds, she'd need massive quantities to affect something as large as the adult creature. The hatchling made another sound and moved closer to its parent. It pressed its smaller head against the adult's neck, and suddenly Sarah's equipment detected massive energy flows between the two beings. The hatchling was somehow transferring its own life force to sustain its parent. "Stop," Sarah called out. "You'll kill yourself." But the young creature continued, its own life signs beginning to weaken as it poured everything into keeping its parent alive. Sarah watched in horror and amazement as the adult's vital signs stabilized slightly, while the hatchling began to collapse. "No, no, no," Sarah muttered, moving quickly between both creatures. She adjusted her medical scanner to monitor both life forms simultaneously. The hatchling's sacrifice was buying time, but at an unsustainable cost. "Think," Sarah told herself. There had to be another way. Her eyes fell on the shuttle's emergency medical kit. Inside was a prototype device she'd been field testing, a biofield amplifier designed to boost natural healing processes. It had worked on humans and several other species, but never on anything like this. She pulled out the device and began calibrating it for the alien physiology. The math was guesswork, but the principles should hold. If she could amplify the adult's own healing abilities while supplementing them with the synthesized compounds from the hatchling's blood. "Doc, 15 minutes, Hayes warned. Sarah attached the amplifier to the adult creature's chest and activated her field medical synthesizer. The machine began producing healing compounds based on the hatchling's blood sample, but in much greater quantities than the young being could provide alone. The effect was immediate. The adult's breathing became stronger, and some of the smaller wounds began to close. But the major injuries remained, and the neural damage was beyond anything her equipment could address. The hatchling suddenly lifted its head and looked directly at Sarah. Again, she felt that tingling sensation in her mind, and new images flooded her consciousness. This time she saw what the creatures truly were: ancient guardians of space, protectors of worlds, beings of immense power and wisdom who had watched over countless civilizations. She saw why the GDC wanted them destroyed. These beings could cross galactic distances instantly, their very existence challenging humanity's expansion plans. They had no homeworld to conquer, no resources to claim, but their presence in space routes made human colonial plans impossible to control. The GDC had declared them a threat not because they were dangerous, but because they were free. 10 minutes, Doc." Sarah looked at her patient. The healing was working, but too slowly. The creature needed time she didn't have and medical intervention beyond her capabilities. The hatchling made another gesture, this one toward the stars beyond the asteroid field. Sarah understood immediately. It was showing her the way to safety, to others of their kind who could help. But first, they had to survive the next 10 minutes. Sarah activated her communicator. "Hayes, prepare the shuttle for immediate departure, and power up every medical system we have." "Doc, what are you planning?" Sarah looked at the two magnificent beings, one dying to save the other. In her 3 years in space, she had sworn to preserve life wherever she found it. That oath didn't change just because Admiral Thorne had decided these beings were inconvenient. "I'm planning to save them both," she said firmly, "even if it kills me." Sarah's plan was desperate and probably suicidal, but it was the only chance they had. The adult creature was too large and injured to move, but the hatchling was mobile. If she could stabilize the adult just enough to survive transport, and if the hatchling could somehow carry its parent. "Hayes, I need you to plot a course to the nearest system with advanced medical facilities. And I mean advanced university-level research hospitals. Doc, the nearest facility like that is 3 days away, and those GDC destroyers will catch us in about 8 minutes." Sarah was working frantically with her medical equipment, linking multiple devices together in a configuration that probably violated every safety protocol ever written. "Then we better make sure they don't catch us." The biofield amplifier was working overtime, drawing power from the shuttle's reserves. The adult creature's vital signs had strengthened considerably, but the neural damage remained severe. Sarah estimated the being was conscious but completely paralyzed. The hatchling suddenly made an urgent sound and gestured toward space. Sarah looked up to see the first GDC destroyer emerging from behind a large asteroid, its weapons already charging. "Time's up," Hayes called over the comm. "Doc, we need to go now." Sarah made a decision that would have been considered impossible 5 minutes ago. She began disconnecting her medical equipment from the shuttle's power supply and connecting it directly to the adult creature. "What are you doing?" Hayes asked, his voice tight with alarm. "These beings are energy-based life forms," Sarah explained rapidly. "They don't just have biological processes, they manipulate fundamental forces. If I can create a bioelectrical feedback loop between my medical equipment and the creature's natural energy systems." The hatchling seemed to understand her plan before she finished explaining it. The young being moved to its parent's side and placed its claws on specific points along the adult's body. Sarah felt another mental connection forming, this one showing her exactly where to position her equipment. The moment she completed the connections, everything changed. The adult creature's eyes opened, not just the physical eyes, but what Sarah could only describe as energy eyes, glowing patterns that appeared along its entire body. Power flowed through the bioelectrical loop, not just healing the creature, but transforming it. "Impossible," Sarah breathed. Her equipment readings were off the charts. The creature wasn't just recovering, it was evolving, adapting, becoming something more than it had been before. The first GDC destroyer opened fire, plasma beams lancing through space toward their position. But the adult creature moved, no longer paralyzed, its massive form uncoiling with fluid grace. One wing spread wide and the plasma beams struck it harmlessly, the energy absorbed and redirected. "Doc, what the hell is happening out there?" Hayes shouted over the comm. Sarah watched in amazement as the adult creature began to glow with internal light. The hatchling moved to its parent's head, and both beings looked at Sarah with expressions of profound gratitude. Then the adult spoke, not with sound, but directly into her mind. The voice was ancient, wise, and filled with warmth. "Human healer, you have given us more than life. You have shown us the possibility of true cooperation between our species." Sarah felt tears forming in her eyes. "I just did what any doctor would do." "No," the creature replied. "You risked everything for beings you barely understood, against the orders of your own kind. This is not common among any species we have encountered." The GDC destroyers were moving closer, more weapons powering up. Sarah could see at least a dozen ships now, surrounding the asteroid field in a tactical formation designed to prevent any escape. "We need to get you both to safety," Sarah said urgently. The adult creature's mental voice carried amusement. "Human healer, you still do not understand what you have done. Your medical intervention has not just healed us, it has created a new form of life. We are no longer merely biological beings. We have become something that transcends the physical limitations that made us vulnerable." As if to demonstrate, the creature began to change. Its massive form started to become translucent, then transparent, then something that existed both in normal space and somewhere else entirely. The hatchling underwent the same transformation, its smaller form flickering between solid and energy states. "We can now exist in dimensions your species cannot perceive," the adult explained. "The weapons that wounded us before cannot touch us in this state. But more importantly, we can now share this gift with others." Sarah felt a strange sensation washing over her. Not painful, but transformative. Her environmental suit's readings went haywire as energy patterns she couldn't understand flowed around her. "What's happening to me?" she asked. We are offering you a choice, human healer. You can remain as you are, bound by the physical limitations of your species. Or you can join us in a state where life and death, matter and energy, become fluid concepts. Your healing skills would be enhanced beyond anything you can imagine. Sarah looked at her hands. They were starting to glow with the same internal light she'd seen in the creatures. She could feel her consciousness expanding, her understanding of biology and medicine deepening at an incredible rate. The GDC fleet was moving into attack formation. She could hear Hayes calling for her over the comm, his voice increasingly frantic. But she could also sense something else, the presence of other beings like the adult and hatchling, ancient guardians awakening throughout the galaxy. If I accept this transformation, Sarah asked, what happens to my crew? To other humans. That depends on them, the adult replied. Some will fear what they do not understand and try to destroy it. Others, like you, will see the possibility for something greater. The choice will always be theirs to make. Sarah thought of her oath as a doctor, her commitment to preserving and enhancing life. She thought of Hayes and the crew of the Mercy's Hand who had trusted her judgment. She thought of Admiral Thorne and the GDC, so terrified of anything they couldn't control that they were willing to destroy sapient beings. Can I help others make this choice? She asked. Can I show them what I've learned? That is exactly what we hope you will do. The first destroyer fired its main weapons, massive energy beams designed to obliterate asteroids. The beams passed harmlessly through the space where the creatures had been, striking nothing but empty void. Sarah made her choice. The transformation was like nothing she could have imagined. Her consciousness expanded beyond her physical form, while still maintaining her essential self. She could perceive multiple dimensions simultaneously, understand energy patterns that governed life itself, and most remarkably, she could still heal, but now on a scale that encompassed not just individuals but entire ecosystems. The GDC fleet found nothing but empty space and a small medical shuttle with a confused crew reporting that their chief medical officer had simply vanished. But throughout the galaxy, other beings began to sense something new, a presence that offered healing, understanding, and the possibility of transcending the limitations that had always defined existence. Sarah Chen had become something unprecedented, a human who could bridge the gap between species, dimensions, and states of being, and she was just getting started. Admiral Thorne stood in the command center of the GDC flagship Iron Justice, staring at the empty space where his sensors had detected the two dragons just minutes before. His tactical display showed no debris, no energy signatures, nothing but the confused medical frigate Mercy's Hand broadcasting distress calls about their missing chief medical officer. Sir, the medical shuttle is requesting permission to dock. They claim their doctor disappeared during the investigation, reported Commander Walsh, Thorne's aide. Thorne's jaw tightened. In 30 years of military service, he had never encountered a situation quite like this. The dragons were gone, the human doctor was missing, and his fleet of 12 destroyers had found nothing but empty space to shoot at. Bring them aboard for debriefing, Thorne ordered. I want to know everything that happened out there. An hour later, Lieutenant Commander Hayes sat in the interrogation room, his hands shaking slightly as he recounted the events. Dr. Chen insisted on helping the injured creature. She said it was her medical duty. Then there was this light, and when it faded, she was just gone. Thorne studied the man's biometric readings. Hayes was telling the truth, at least as far as he understood it. And you saw no sign of the creatures after this light appeared? No, sir. They vanished at the same moment Dr. Chen did. Commander, these beings are classified as Class 5 existential threats for a reason. They possess abilities that could destabilize human expansion throughout the galaxy. Your doctor may have been taken by them, or worse, she may have been converted into something we no longer recognize as human. Hayes looked up sharply. Converted? Sir, Dr. Chen is the finest medical officer I've ever served with. Whatever happened, I guarantee she wouldn't do anything to harm humanity. Thorne's expression remained cold. Commander, you have no idea what these entities are capable of. Dr. Chen may no longer be the person you knew. What Thorne didn't tell Hayes was the full scope of the threat the dragons represented. The classified reports described beings that could travel instantly between star systems, manipulate energy on a planetary scale, and most terrifyingly, transform other species into something like themselves. The GDC had spent years hunting them precisely because they represented an alternative to human-controlled expansion. Humans were meant to dominate the galaxy through technology, military might, and careful resource management. The dragons offered something else entirely, a path that transcended physical limitations and made traditional concepts of territory and control meaningless. 3 days later, the first reports began coming in from colonies throughout the Outer Rim. Medical emergencies that should have been fatal were being resolved by mysterious interventions. Plague outbreaks on Kepler 438b simply stopped spreading, with infected individuals reporting visions of a human woman who appeared in their dreams and somehow healed them from within. On the mining colony of Ross 128C, a cave-in that should have killed 30 workers resulted in no casualties when the trapped miners reported seeing glowing figures who showed them safe passages through the collapsed tunnels. The figures matched descriptions of the dragons, but witnesses also mentioned a human woman who seemed to coordinate their efforts. "Sir," Commander Walsh reported, "we're getting similar reports from 15 different systems. Medical miracles, unexplained rescues, and in every case, witnesses describe seeing Dr. Chen working alongside creatures that match our dragon profiles." Thorne studied the star map, noting the pattern of incidents. They were spreading outward from the Kepler 442 system in all directions, but there was strategy to it. Every intervention involved saving lives or alleviating suffering. No military targets, no infrastructure damage, nothing that could be classified as an attack. It's recruitment, Thorne realized. They're showing people what they can offer. The implications were staggering. If the dragons could transform humans and grant them these abilities, they could undermine the entire foundation of human civilization. Why struggle with the limitations of technology and biology when you could simply transcend them? But there was something else in the reports that troubled Thorne even more. The transformed humans, and there were definitely more of them now, weren't trying to force their abilities on anyone. They simply helped where help was needed and moved on. They offered no ultimatums, made no demands, and seemed genuinely content to exist on the margins of normal space. It was, Thorne admitted privately, exactly what a truly advanced and benevolent species might do. That thought terrified him more than any direct threat ever could. The real crisis came when Dr. Chen appeared aboard the medical research station orbiting Proxima Centauri. She materialized in the middle of a futile attempt to save children dying from a genetic plague that had already claimed thousands of lives. The head of the medical team, Dr. Martinez, later reported that Chen appeared exactly as she had before her disappearance, but with an aura of light around her and knowledge that seemed impossible. She didn't just treat the symptoms, Martinez reported to his superiors. She understood the genetic code on a level that our best computers can't match. She showed us how to not just cure the plague, but how to strengthen the children's immune systems permanently. Then she offered us a choice. The choice, according to Martinez, was simple. The medical team could continue working within the limitations of current human medicine, or they could accept a transformation that would allow them to heal in ways previously unimaginable. The catch, if it could be called that, was that they would have to give up their attachment to purely human society and become bridges between normal humans and the transcended beings. 3 of Martinez's team accepted the transformation. The others declined, and Chen respected their decision completely. But those who transformed immediately began demonstrating abilities that made the most advanced medical technology look primitive. They can see illness at the quantum level, Martinez reported in his final communication. They understand how consciousness affects physical health, how emotional states create or destroy cellular integrity. They're not just doctors anymore. They're healers in the truest sense of the word. Admiral Thorne found himself facing an impossible situation. The transformed humans were performing genuine miracles, saving lives that conventional medicine couldn't save, and doing it without asking for anything in return. They weren't attacking human settlements or demanding resources. They were simply healing and offering others the chance to heal at levels never before imagined. But they were also proving that human technology and human control were ultimately unnecessary. Every person they helped, every life they saved, demonstrated that there were alternatives to the path humanity had chosen for galactic expansion. The worst part was that the transformed humans seemed genuinely happy. Reports from families who had lost members to the transformation initially described grief and anger. But follow-up interviews revealed something unexpected. The transformed individuals could still visit their families, still communicate with them, and still care about their well-being. They weren't lost. They were simply operating on a broader scale. As Thorne reviewed the latest reports, he realized that his classification of the dragons as an existential threat had been both completely accurate and completely wrong. They were indeed a threat to human civilization as it currently existed, but they weren't threatening to destroy humanity. They were offering to elevate it. The question was whether humanity was wise enough to accept the offer, or too frightened to embrace what it might become. Thorne made a decision that would have been unthinkable a week earlier. He ordered his fleet to stand down and sent a message on all channels. "Dr. Chen, if you can hear this, I request a meeting. It's time we talked." Dr. Sarah Chen materialized on the bridge of the Iron Justice exactly 24 hours after Admiral Thorne's transmission. She appeared as she always had, a woman in her early 30s with intelligent dark eyes and steady hands. But there was something more now. A presence that seemed to extend beyond her physical form, and an awareness that encompassed far more than any human should be able to perceive. Thorne's security detail immediately raised their weapons, but he held up a hand to stop them. "Stand down, Dr. Chen, thank you for coming." Sarah looked around the bridge, noting the fear and uncertainty in the crew's faces. "Admiral Thorne, I received your message. I'm curious about what you want to discuss." "I want to understand what you've become," Thorne said directly, "and what you want from humanity." Sarah smiled, and for a moment she looked exactly like the dedicated doctor who had served aboard the Mercy's Hand. "I'm still exactly who I was, Admiral. I'm still a healer. I've just learned to heal on a scale I never imagined possible, by abandoning your humanity." "No," Sarah said firmly, "by expanding it. What I've become isn't less human. It's more human than I ever was before. I understand now what we're truly capable of." Thorne gestured to his ready room. "Walk with me, Doctor. Let's discuss this privately." Once they were alone, Thorne activated privacy shields and leaned against his desk. "Dr. Chen, I've been reading reports about your activities across 15 star systems. Medical interventions that violate known laws of physics, healings that our best scientists can't explain, and recruitment of other humans into whatever you've become." "I haven't recruited anyone," Sarah said. "I've offered choices." "There's a difference." "Is there? You appear to dying people, perform miracles, then offer them the chance to become like you. How is that not recruitment?" Sarah moved to the viewport and looked out at the stars. "Admiral, may I ask you something? In all your years of military service, have you ever encountered a problem that couldn't be solved with enough firepower?" "Of course. Many of them." "What did you do then?" Thorne frowned. "Found a different approach. Used diplomacy, intelligence gathering, economic pressure." "Exactly. You adapted your methods to fit the situation. That's all I'm doing. Showing people that there are more methods available than they previously knew. But the methods you're offering require giving up human society, human limitations, human identity." Sarah turned back to face him. "Do they? Admiral, I'm standing here talking to you right now. I care about the same things I always cared about. Preserving life, alleviating suffering, helping people reach their full potential. The only difference is that my understanding of what's possible has expanded." Thorne studied her face, looking for deception or alien influence. Instead, he saw the same compassionate intelligence that had motivated her to risk everything for 2 wounded dragons. "Show me," he said quietly. "Show you what?" "What you can do. What this transformation really means." Sarah nodded and closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, they were glowing with soft light. "Give me your hand, Admiral." Thorne hesitated, then extended his right hand. The moment Sarah's fingers touched his, he felt his consciousness expand beyond anything he had ever experienced. Suddenly, he could perceive the entire ship around him, not just its physical structure, but the life forces of every crew member aboard. He could sense their fears, their hopes, their individual struggles with doubt and purpose. More than that, he could understand how their emotional states affected their physical health, how stress and uncertainty were literally making them sick. "This is what I see constantly now," Sarah's voice said in his mind. "Not just disease and injury, but the connections between consciousness and physical reality. I can perceive how fear weakens immune systems, how hope accelerates healing, how love literally strengthens the bonds between cells." The vision expanded further. Thorne found himself perceiving the space around the ship, seeing energy patterns that connected star systems, understanding how life forces flowed between worlds like invisible rivers. He saw the dragons not as threats but as gardeners tending to the health of entire galactic regions. They're not trying to control anything, Thorne realized. They're maintaining balance. Exactly. And they've been doing it for millions of years, quietly preventing cosmic disasters that would have wiped out countless civilizations, including ours. The vision faded, but the understanding remained. Thorne stared at Sarah with new comprehension. The Class 5 threat classification was based on fear of the unknown, Sarah finished. The dragons represent a way of existing that doesn't depend on conquest, resource extraction, or territorial control. To a civilization based on those principles, that's naturally seen as threatening. Thorne sat down heavily in his chair. But if what you're showing me is real, then human expansion, the way we've been doing it, is unnecessary and ultimately self-destructive. Yes. Sarah's expression was gentle but firm. Admiral, humanity has been trying to solve scarcity problems by claiming more territory and resources. But the universe isn't actually scarce, it's abundant beyond imagination. We just haven't learned how to access that abundance. And the transformation you're offering would teach us how. It would give individuals the ability to transcend physical limitations, yes. But more importantly, it would help humanity understand its actual role in the galaxy. Thorne was quiet for a long moment. Which is? To be bridges. Humans have something unique, the ability to maintain individual identity while adapting to new forms of existence. Most species either stay locked in their original forms or lose themselves completely when they transcend. Humans can do both, transcend and remain themselves. And the dragons recognize this. They've been waiting for a species like us for eons, not to control or recruit, but to partner with, to help maintain the balance of life throughout the galaxy. Thorne stood and paced to the viewport. Outside, he could see stars that he now understood were connected by invisible networks of life energy. The thought of trying to control all of that seemed not just impossible, but absurd. Dr. Chen, if I were to accept this transformation, what would happen to the GDC fleet, to human space? That would be up to you and others like you to decide. The transformation doesn't eliminate choice, it expands it. You could continue serving in the military, but with a deeper understanding of what you're really protecting. You could help guide humanity toward a more sustainable path while still maintaining human institutions and culture. Or you could choose a completely different path. Become a healer like me, or an explorer who travels between dimensions, or a guardian who helps maintain balance in cosmic systems. The possibilities are literally unlimited. Thorne turned to face her. And if I decline? Then you continue as you are, and I respect that choice completely. But Admiral, the dragons aren't going to stop existing just because the GDC finds them inconvenient, and more humans are going to encounter them as our expansion continues. Wouldn't it be better to approach those encounters with understanding rather than fear? Thorne was quiet for a long time, thinking about everything he had seen and learned. Finally, he looked at Sarah with the expression of a man making a decision that would change everything. Dr. Chen, I'd like to propose something different. Instead of trying to destroy the dragons or contain their influence, what if we established formal diplomatic contact? What if humanity chose to learn from them rather than fight them? Sarah's smile was radiant. Admiral, I think that would be the wisest decision humanity has made in centuries. The first formal meeting between human leadership and the dragons took place in neutral space, far from any inhabited systems. Admiral Thorne had spent 3 weeks convincing the GDC Council that diplomacy was preferable to a war they couldn't win against beings who existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The location Sarah had chosen was perfect for the occasion, a nebula where stellar formation was actively occurring, new stars being born in swirls of cosmic dust and energy. It was, she had explained, a place where creation itself was visible, making it an appropriate setting for what might be the birth of a new era for humanity. Thorne arrived aboard a single diplomatic vessel, accompanied by a small team of advisors and Dr. Martinez, who had chosen to accept transformation and now served as a translator between normal humans and the transcended beings. As their ship approached the designated coordinates, the view screen filled with insight that took everyone's breath away. The adult dragon, the same being Sarah had saved weeks earlier, hung in space like a living constellation. Its scales had become translucent and filled with starlight. Its eyes held the depth of cosmic time, and its presence radiated a wisdom that felt older than human civilization. Beside it, the hatchling had grown considerably, its own form beginning to show the same stellar characteristics as its parent, and moving between them were humans who had accepted transformation. Sarah and dozens of others who had chosen to transcend their physical limitations. They moved through space as easily as walking through air, their forms shifting between solid matter and pure energy as needed. Admiral Thorne, Sarah's voice came through their communication system, though she was clearly speaking directly into their minds. Welcome to the first embassy between our species. The adult dragon's massive head turned toward their ship, and when it spoke, its voice carried the weight of eons. Admiral, I am called Astrolux in your language. I am pleased that your species has chosen wisdom over fear. Thorne activated his communication system. Astrolux, on behalf of humanity, I apologize for the actions taken against you and your offspring. We acted out of ignorance and fear. Understanding that brings growth, Astrolux replied. Fear is natural when encountering the unknown. Wisdom lies in moving beyond that fear to seek understanding. Dr. Martinez floated closer to their ship, his transformed state allowing him to survive in hard vacuum while still maintaining his human appearance. Admiral, Astrolux would like to show you something. The true scope of what the dragons have been protecting. I'm ready, Thorne replied. Though he wasn't sure he actually was, the space around their ship suddenly filled with light, not blinding but revealing. Thorne and his team found themselves perceiving the galaxy as the dragons saw it, a vast, interconnected network of life forces, energy patterns, and consciousness streams that flowed between star systems like the circulation of blood in a vast cosmic organism. Earth appeared in this vision as a bright node of activity, but it was connected to thousands of other worlds where life was developing, evolving and reaching toward greater complexity. The dragons moved through this network like immune cells, identifying and correcting imbalances that could threaten the whole system. For 12 million years, we have maintained this balance, Astrolux explained, preventing cosmic disasters that would sterilize entire sectors, guiding the evolution of consciousness, protecting young species from threats they cannot yet perceive. Thorne watched in amazement as the vision showed him examples. Massive asteroid impacts deflected from populated worlds, stellar flares redirected to prevent the destruction of developing civilizations, and dimensional rifts sealed before they could unleash cosmic chaos. You've been protecting us, he realized. All this time, humanity's survival has depended on your guardianship. Not just humanity, Sarah added, her transformed consciousness joining the communication. Every species that has ever developed consciousness in this galaxy has benefited from their protection, including several that humanity has encountered but never recognized as sapient. The vision shifted to show human colonial expeditions encountering various alien species. In each case, Thorne saw how human actions had unintentionally disrupted delicate ecological and consciousness balances, causing suffering that the dragons had worked to minimize. We're the real threat, Thorne said quietly, not to the dragons but to the balance they maintain. Not a threat, Astrolux corrected gently. A challenge. Humans have tremendous potential, but also tremendous capacity for disruption. This is why your species is so important. You have the ability to become conscious participants in galactic balance rather than unconscious disruptors. The hatchling, which had been quietly observing the exchange, suddenly moved closer to their ship. When it spoke, its voice carried the enthusiasm of youth combined with ancient wisdom. I was dying when the human healer found us, it said, not from physical wounds but from despair. We had begun to believe that no young species could learn to see beyond their immediate needs. But she proved us wrong. Sarah's form materialized on the bridge of Thorne's ship, the boundaries between matter and energy becoming fluid in her presence. Admiral, what the hatchling is saying is that humanity has the potential to become the first species to consciously evolve beyond scarcity-based thinking while retaining individual identity and cultural diversity. Explain that, Thorne requested. Most species that transcend physical limitations either lose their individual identities or remain so attached to their original forms that they can't adapt to new realities. Humans seem to be able to do both, transform completely while remaining essentially human. Dr. Martinez nodded, his own transformed state demonstrating the point. I can perceive and interact with cosmic forces that were invisible to me before, but I'm still Martinez. I still care about the same things, still have the same core values. I've just gained the ability to act on those values at a galactic scale. Astrolux projected a new vision, this one showing possible futures for humanity. In one timeline, humans continued their current expansion path, eventually exhausting resources and triggering cosmic imbalances that required dragon intervention on an increasingly massive scale. In another, humans learned to work with the dragons, becoming conscious partners in maintaining galactic health while developing technologies and societies that enhanced, rather than depleted, cosmic abundance. The choice is entirely yours, Astrolux said. We will not force evolution on any species, but we offer partnership to those wise enough to accept it. Thorn studied the visions, seeing the stark differences between the timelines. In the partnership timeline, humanity spread throughout the galaxy not as conquerors but as healers and gardeners, developing worlds and civilizations that added to cosmic vitality rather than draining it. What would this partnership look like practically? He asked. Sarah smiled. We've already begun establishing the framework. Transformed humans serve as bridges between normal human society and dragon consciousness. We help identify and solve problems before they become crises, facilitate communication between species that operate on completely different scales of existence, and gradually introduce new technologies and perspectives that enhance life rather than depleting it. And normal humans? Continue being normal humans, Dr. Martinez said. The transformation is always voluntary, but even humans who choose not to transform benefit from the enhanced medical care, the prevention of cosmic disasters, and the gradual development of more sustainable technologies. Astrolux's voice carried a note of ancient amusement. Admiral, your species has a saying, if you can't beat them, join them. But we prefer, if you can't join them, help them become something you can join. The hatchling moved closer, its youthful energy bright against the cosmic backdrop. Will you help us, Admiral? Will humanity choose to become conscious gardeners of life, rather than unconscious consumers of it? Thorn looked around at his crew, seeing wonder and possibility in their faces rather than fear. He thought about Sarah's journey from ship's doctor to cosmic healer, about the lives already being saved by transformed humans, about the vision of humanity as partners in maintaining galactic balance rather than threats to it. He made his decision. On behalf of humanity, Admiral Thorn said formally, I accept your offer of partnership. We have much to learn, and apparently much to contribute. The response from the dragons and transformed humans was immediate and overwhelming, a wave of joy and relief that rippled through space itself, carried by the cosmic networks they had shown him. For the first time in millions of years, the dragons were no longer alone in their guardianship of galactic life, and humanity had just chosen to become something far greater than they had ever imagined possible. 5 years after the first formal contact with the dragons, humanity had transformed in ways that no one could have predicted. The changes weren't dramatic or sudden. They unfolded gradually like flowers opening to sunlight, as humans across the galaxy encountered new possibilities and chose their own paths forward. Dr. Sarah Chen stood in what had once been the medical bay of the Mercy's Hand, now converted into something that resembled a cross between a hospital and a temple. The ship itself had been transformed, its hull incorporating dragon-taught technologies that allowed it to exist simultaneously in normal space and higher dimensions. Lieutenant Commander Hayes, now Captain Hayes, had chosen to accept a limited transformation that let him pilot the ship through dimensional space while remaining essentially human. Sarah, we're receiving another emergency call from the Vega colony, Hayes announced from the bridge. Another outbreak of that genetic plague we saw on Proxima Centauri. Sarah nodded, her consciousness already reaching out across space to assess the situation. The ability to perceive illness and suffering at interstellar distances had been one of the most significant gifts of her transformation. It's not the same plague, but it's related. Someone is deliberately creating these biological weapons. This was the new reality. Humanity's expansion into space had attracted the attention of species that saw young civilizations as threats to be eliminated before they could mature. The dragons had always protected developing species from such threats, but with human partnership, they could now respond more effectively. Plot a course through dimensional space, Sarah instructed, and send a message to Admiral Thorne. We're going to need the diplomatic corps for this one. Admiral Thorne had undergone his own transformation 6 months after the first contact meeting. Unlike Sarah's complete transcendence or Hayes's limited enhancement, Thorne had chosen what the dragons called the bridge state, a transformation that gave him enhanced perception and consciousness. While keeping him firmly rooted in human military culture and thinking, he now served as humanity's first cosmic defense coordinator, overseeing a new kind of military force that protected not just human interests, but the balance of life throughout the local galaxy sector. His ships were crewed by volunteers from dozens of human worlds, some transformed, some not, all working together to maintain peace and respond to threats that conventional military thinking couldn't address. The Mercy's hand emerged from dimensional space near the Vega colony to find a crisis that perfectly illustrated how the human-dragon partnership had changed everything. The colony was under biological attack, but the attackers weren't using traditional weapons. They were employing engineered diseases that targeted consciousness itself, attempting to reduce the colonists to mindless drones. "This is the work of the Void Cult," announced Astrolux, the ancient dragon whose healing had started everything. The great being materialized near their ship in its energy form, starlight flowing through translucent scales that spanned several kilometers. They seek to eliminate consciousness wherever they find it, believing that awareness itself is a cosmic error. Sarah felt a chill of recognition. The Void Cult was one of several ancient species that the dragons had been quietly fighting for eons. Their goal was to return the universe to a state of pure entropy, eliminating all organized matter, energy, and thought. They had been dormant in this sector for millions of years, but humanity's expansion had apparently awakened them. "How do we fight something that wants to eliminate consciousness itself?" asked Captain Hayes. The answer came from an unexpected source, Dr. Martinez, who had become one of the most skilled consciousness healers among the transformed humans. His voice reached them from the planet's surface, where he was already working to counter the biological weapon. "We don't fight it," Martinez said. "We heal it. The Void Cult isn't evil in the traditional sense. They're beings whose consciousness has been damaged by cosmic trauma. They're trying to eliminate awareness because they've experienced it only as suffering." Sarah immediately understood the implication. A medical problem, not a military one. Admiral Thorne's voice joined the communication from his flagship. "Sarah, I have 12 ships ready to support whatever approach you think will work. But I have to ask, is it possible to heal beings that have been insane for millions of years?" "We're about to find out," Sarah replied, already beginning to shift into her full transcended state. "But we're not going in alone." What followed was unlike any military engagement in human history. Instead of weapons, Sarah and her team deployed healing energies. Instead of attacking the Void Cult's ships, they approached them with offers of consciousness repair. Instead of trying to destroy beings whose minds had been shattered by cosmic trauma, they attempted to heal the underlying damage that had driven them to nihilistic madness. The first contact with a Void Cult vessel was terrifying. The beings aboard were so damaged that their presence created fields of psychic entropy that threatened to unravel the consciousness of anyone who approached them. But Sarah and the other transformed humans had learned to maintain their awareness even in the face of cosmic-scale chaos. "We know you're in pain," Sarah projected toward the Void Cult ship. "We know consciousness feels like torture to you. But there's another way." The response was immediate and violent. Waves of entropy that tried to dissolve not just her body but her very sense of self. But Sarah had learned to exist in states where the boundaries between self and universe became fluid. The attack passed through her harmlessly. "You don't have to eliminate consciousness to end suffering," she continued. "You can heal the damage that makes consciousness painful." For the first time in millions of years, a Void Cult vessel stopped attacking. Sarah felt something she could only describe as cosmic amazement, emanating from the ship being so ancient and traumatized that they had forgotten healing was possible suddenly, perceiving an alternative to eternal war against existence itself. What happened next required every transformed human in the sector working together, supported by dragon wisdom and conventional human determination. Slowly, carefully, they began to heal minds that had been broken by events that occurred before Earth's sun had formed. The process took months. But gradually the Void Cult vessels stopped their attack on the Vega colony. Some of the beings chose to accept healing and joined the galactic community as reformed guardians of consciousness. Others chose to return to dormancy rather than face the challenge of rebuilding their sanity. A few, too damaged to heal, were gently contained in dimensional spaces where they could exist without causing harm to themselves or others. Admiral Thorne found himself managing not a military victory but a rehabilitation project on a cosmic scale. Sarah, what you've accomplished here. I don't think any species has ever successfully treated cosmic-scale mental illness before. Sarah smiled, her consciousness now capable of perceiving the health of entire sectors of space. That's because no species has ever had the combination of dragon wisdom, human adaptability, and the willingness to treat even enemies as patients rather than targets. The aftermath of the Vega incident marked another milestone in humanity's evolution. Word of the successful healing of the Void Cult spread throughout the galaxy, attracting attention from species that had never before considered cooperation with younger civilizations. Within a year, humanity found itself at the center of a growing alliance of species committed to healing rather than conquest, growth rather than exploitation, and consciousness expansion rather than territorial acquisition. The dragons, no longer alone in their guardianship role, began sharing knowledge and responsibilities they had carried alone for eons. Dr. Sarah Chen, still recognizably human despite her cosmic awareness, stood once again on the observation deck of the Mercy's Hand. But now she wasn't looking at empty space. She was perceiving a galaxy alive with cooperation between species that had learned to see beyond their own limitations. The hatchling she had helped save years earlier had grown into a magnificent being of starlight and wisdom, but it still visited regularly, curious about human culture and eager to learn new approaches to cosmic healing. Other young humans, inspired by the possibilities they saw in the transformed healers, were choosing their own paths toward transcendence or enhanced awareness. "Any regrets, Doc?" asked Captain Hayes, joining her at the viewport. Sarah considered the question seriously. She had given up a simple life as a ship's doctor to become something unprecedented in galactic history. A bridge between species, dimensions, and states of existence. She could never again be purely human, but she had helped her species become something far greater than they had ever dreamed possible. "No," she said finally. "No regrets at all." Outside the viewport, dragons and humans worked together to tend a garden that spanned star systems, healing worlds damaged by war and conflict, nurturing young civilizations toward wisdom, and slowly transforming a galaxy that had known mostly struggle into something that was beginning to resemble paradise. And at the center of it all was the simple truth that had started everything. Sometimes the greatest victories come not from destroying your enemies, but from healing them. Sometimes the most powerful weapons are compassion and understanding. And sometimes the future belongs no